Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Governance Initiative's Global Summit 2022 with the theme Ambition to Action. Climate Governance Malaysia is the Secretariat for the ASEAN Climate Governance Network, which is supported by all institutes of directors in the region. And we have curated a series of 4 sessions for this 24-hour Global Summit. This is the 3rd session, curated by the ASEAN Climate Governance Network, Sustainable Financing, Sustainable Future. The Climate Governance Initiative mobilizes boards of directors around the world to address climate change in their businesses, building on the World Economic Forum's principles for effective climate governance. This network now comprises 24 chapters in 56 countries. The climate crisis is informed by science, and as an existential crisis, throwing up significant risks and opportunities, all directors need to be climate literate. To discuss sustainable financing, sustainable future, we are delighted to have a great lineup for you today. We start with some thoughts from Natasha Landell-Mills, partner and head of stewardship at Sarasin and Partners. This will be followed by a panel moderated by Kulvech, Janvatanavit, Colin, CEO of Thai Institute of Directors Association, and the panelists are Efrio or F. Louis B. Amatong, advisor to the chair of the ASEAN Capital Markets Forum and consultant for the IFC Sustainable Banking and Finance Network of the Philippines, Professor Veronique Lafonvinez, associate professor of business education and senior lecturer of the Department of Finance, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Dr. Agnes Tai, Director of Great Glory Investment Corporation and the Head of Sustainability and Advisory of Arta Asset Management in Hong Kong. All of the sessions are recorded, so you will have access to these recordings. Enjoy this session.
Hello. My name is Natasha Landell-Mills, and I'm a partner and head of stewardship at an asset management firm called Sarasin and Partners based in London. I'm very pleased to be here today to speak with you about something that's very close to my heart, which is both the climate crisis and what we can do about it. As you'll all be very well aware, of course, the climate crisis is not just an environmental phenomenon. It's a social imperative demanding an economic response. Both physical and transition risks are profoundly changing the landscape companies operate in. So boards need to adapt to demonstrate how their businesses will not just be resilient, but will thrive by delivering solutions. This is what investors want to see. And we are also acutely aware of our fiduciary duties in terms of our commitments to savers and how we respond to the climate crisis. So how does reporting fit into their broader ambition, this broader ambition? It's central. As the session title alludes to, what gets measured gets managed. Whether we like it or not, this is a reality. So if we want climate change to be managed, we need to start measuring it. This will enable accountability for climate impacts. What has effectively been treated as off balance sheet needs to come on balance sheet. When this happens, the global incentive framework will automatically adjust. While I believe there is broad agreement on the need to improve reporting on climate change, TCFD and ISSB only tackle part of the market architecture that needs to be upgraded. That's not to say they're not important, they are, and progress towards ensuring both of these are developed further and also made mandatory, in my view, should be fast-tracked. But alongside these new standards, so the TCFD and ISSB, companies' financial reporting should urgently encompass material climate factors. This is because, with all the will in the world, until companies' numbers are aligned with achieving a net zero outcome, their capital allocation will not be. In other words, companies need to be rewarded for taking action, not penalized. Right now, in the vast majority of cases, companies leave climate change out of their accounting processes. So they're not accurately reflecting the economic impacts from the transition or the physical impacts, which means they have very little incentive to change. So for example, if you own a thermal coal facility, impairment testing should definitely incorporate the expected carbon taxes, falling demand, and indeed falling prices over the medium term. As long as the accounts ignore these economic realities, too much capital will flow into new thermal coal. Fortunately, both the key standard setters in this area, the IASB, the International Accounting Standards Board, and the IAASB, the International Audit and Assurance Standards Board, as well as regulators in Europe, the US, the UK, and elsewhere, they're recognizing this point and have made clear that under existing rules, material climate risk must be incorporated. This does not depend on the development of new standards by the IAASB or the TCFD. Companies need to act to meet these rules today. Investors are equally clear. Large alliances such as the Institutional Investor Group on Climate Change, the PRI, the Asia Investor Group on Climate Change, etc., have been calling for climate conscious accounting since 2020. And when I say that, I mean the financial statements need to incorporate the impacts of climate change. Investors are actually going further in their ask. They're asking for a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway to be visible in the notes to the accounts. Investors want to understand how the entity's financial condition would be impacted by the promised decarbonisation scenario. They want to know whether capital enhancement is predicated on the continuation, in essence, of non-aligned activities. So in the end, we will not get Paris-aligned capital allocation if we fail to ensure we have Paris-aligned accounting. The latest research of the Climate Action 100 Plus Focus Company Accounts by Carbon Tracker, which was published just last week, demonstrates a universal failure to deliver this. Climate needs to be brought back on the balance sheet, and robust strategies and CapEx plans developed as a result. I therefore urge you at this session to focus your gaze not just on TCFD and IAASB, but on the more immediate gap in reporting that requires no new rules or standards, just implementation. We can do this today. Ensuring companies' financial statements are aligned with a sustainable planet, not predicated on its destruction. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kulvech Janvatanavit, and welcome to our session, which is Sustainable Financing for Sustainable Future. And thanks for Sunita for introducing all of us already. And I just enjoyed the powerful video from Natasha, Landell-Mills. And I wrote down that green companies need to be rewarded, not penalized. And I guess what we are talking today with the three great speakers is about this and through financing. So without any further ado, we have 40 minutes and let's start. We're going to divide this into past, present, and future. And let's talk about the past first so that we can understand the background, how did it arrive today. So maybe from Elf, may I ask, call you Elf? You know, you have been, you have been, you know, from the regulators' point of view, the regulators now have to like facilitate the direction and even accelerate the direction of even net zero. And so how did green financing develop in the past 5 or 10 years?
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you very much to Climate Governance Initiative and the organizers for inviting us to be part of this panel this afternoon. I think if we step back, you can think of green finance as really a response to the challenges and risks posed by climate change. And I think you saw that in the video that we just watched before this panel session. Climate change, I think we all accept, particularly here in Asia, poses both physical risks in terms of severe weather events and also transitional and regulatory risks, because things need to change if we're going to prevent the dire impact of these harsh environmental weather events. Not only do these risks affect us as individuals, but again, as was pointed out by Natasha in that video earlier, they also affect us as companies and businesses, right? So green finance really is a way, as Natasha was talking about, is to encourage businesses to move down a more responsible pathway towards a lower carbon future and to discourage further contribution or staying longer in a high carbon future, right? So essentially governments, investors, and now increasingly consumers want to discourage, they want to vote with their money to discourage companies and businesses from contributing to continued climate change. And they want to encourage companies and businesses to mitigate the risk of climate change by moving towards a low carbon future. And one way to do that is to provide adequate financing for that kind of transition.
Okay, so so in the past, the green financing has become more and more important because that is going to accelerate the it will reduce cost of capital for the low greener business. So what about other two? Professor Veronique or Dr. Agnes, any addition to what has been done in the past on green financing, please?
We can trace the roots of sustainability movements quite a few decades back. And originally, I think it was mostly what I would design as a tree hugger movement. In terms of the shift to the business, that is only about 10 years ago. And I think it's related to businesses realizing the materiality of climate change on business continuity. One of the earliest signs that I tracked of the shift to a more business approach was with insurance. When the insurance sector had to deal with Katrina and started realizing that the frequency and severity of natural disasters was increasing way beyond what their models had assumed and started digging into that. That's when climate change started to be taken a bit more seriously by businesses. And I think it has accelerated over the last, say, 10 years. And Agnes can talk way better than I can about the role of investors because that's her expertise. That has been really pushing. So you have the investor base, you have the risk managers, and of course the consumers that have all together pushed to get sustainability on the agenda. And now we can see with the Climate Governance Initiative that finally we're having an awakening of the boards to this material risk for business. And that's why the Climate Governance Initiative is so important, because when it was launched by Karina and her fellow directors, it's a realization that boards need to be educated, because you can no longer ignore it. But I want to hand over to Agnes, because she has the asset buy side perspective.
Thanks, Veronique. Thank you, Colin. My big thanks to Climate Governance Malaysia for inviting the Hong Kong chapter, where Veronique and I belong, to join this Climate Governance Global Summit this year. Hong Kong has just launched our chapter on the 21st of September, which is less than 3 weeks ago. So it's a great pleasure for us to be in this session sharing with you. My perspectives is really from the investors' point of view, as well as from the corporate's point of view, which mostly are the investee companies in the portfolios. So back in 2006, everybody heard of this movie called An Inconvenient Truth, right? So I was in California and really shocked. So starting from 2010, which was 12 years ago, for our family, we started doing a little bit of investments on a trial basis on things like forestry, hydrogen fuel cells, and low energy consumption apps. But we weren't very successful because the technology wasn't ripe and the market wasn't ready for it. I still remember that back in 2012, when I started delivering sustainability programs for the Hong Kong Institute of Directors, that word called sustainability really sounded like a very, alien sort of word. But today, fast forward, starting from 2005, where the UNPRI had just started, now today we have over 4,600 signatories, which they amass 121 trillion. Now that's the old figure as of a year ago. Today, China has 111 signatories signing up as responsible investors, and Hong Kong has 87, and the numbers are growing in the rest of Asia as well. So according to Morgan Stanley, ESG investing has grown substantially in 2021, which had doubled to $100 billion US. Now that's still a very small figure compared to total assets under management of 160 trillion US dollars estimated. But just one last very quick point is that Hong Kong has been designated as the green finance hub in the Greater Bay Area of China. And as of last year, according to Green Bonds Initiative, Hong Kong has already arranged and issued 57 billion worth of green and sustainable debt instruments, 31 billion in bonds, 25 billion in loans. So everything's growing really, really fast. In the past, I would agree with Veronique that really a big growth in the last 5 years or so, particularly after COP25.
Wow, this is fascinating, and many thanks to Professor Veronique. I did not know that it's the insurance that sparked this, this movement, and it developed itself into what Dr. Agnes said, that today Hong Kong is the green finance hub, and the green bond 57 billion. Wow! So we are seeing the development that is so fast. Let me ask you about today then. Now, so it's big. It's so big, but are there any challenges on green financing, green bonds, from your perspective as a regulators, as a asset management, as a banks, as a issuers? So what are we facing as a challenge right now? Anyone?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. If I could go first on where we are now, I think the biggest challenge, particularly in Southeast Asia, still is a need to build further awareness about green finance. So as Dr. Agnes has pointed out, this is growing worldwide. So when ASEAN first started looking at encouraging green finance in 2016, I think the number that we had from those signed up for the UN Principles for Responsible Investment, something like 21 trillion. We were interested already at 21, 26 trillion. And as Dr. Agnes has pointed out, the latest count as of April this year is something like 121 trillion signed up for the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. So that's a lot of money that's available. And I think the challenge in Southeast Asia is, while many of us are aware of the risks on some level, we are not yet fully aware of the opportunities, that there are actually business opportunities for transitioning towards a low carbon future, newer technology that is more efficient, saves money, also saves the planet, but also saves companies money, reduces processing time, is more efficient. And there is financing that is available. And because of this lack of mainstreaming, if you will, of sustainable finance in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN regulators, the ASEAN Capital Market Forum, which is composed of all of the capital market regulators for the 10 ASEAN countries, have actually launched a number of initiatives, including the introduction of the ASEAN Green, Social, and Sustainability Bond Standards in 2017 and 2018, the launch of the ASEAN Sustainable Capital Market Roadmap in 2020, and most recently at COP26 last year, the issuance of version 1 of the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance. I won't go into all of those initiatives, but the idea behind the initiatives really is to provide guidance to ASEAN companies on how they can tap this 121 trillion, or at least a portion of this 121 trillion in financing that's available, and also to provide some kind of assurance to investors like Dr. Agnes and others like her who are committed to a sustainable future, that financial instruments carrying the ASEAN labels adhere to international best practice and standards. So what we're trying to do is to facilitate this connection between the investors and the companies and the investment opportunities in Southeast Asia. To date, we have about $30 billion already issued in ASEAN Green, Social, and Sustainability bonds since 2017 across 4 ASEAN countries, including 3 sovereign issuances by Philippines, Thailand, and recently Singapore. And we have a very large $2 billion sustainable sukuk issuance from Indonesia that is also ASEAN aligned. And we expect, just as the other panelists expect, that these numbers will only grow faster in the future, but we want those numbers to grow faster. We want more companies to be able to access this financing in order to transition to a low carbon future.
Okay, wow. Sounds like
maybe I can step in here,
yes,
because I think F has made some really, really important points about the role of governments and regulators in the development of green finance. One of the roles is to provide standardization. So one of the challenges that the industry, sustainable finance industry, is facing right now is a lot of confusion around taxonomies and standards. And there's been a huge amount of work that has been accomplished towards providing taxonomies, standards, and convergence between different regulators, particularly mainland China and Europe, have been extremely active, and we've seen the common ground taxonomy, which has been adopted recently. That provides very useful guidance to participants in the industry. If you look at finance and you look at the sell side, which is the issuing side, there's been already quite a lot of standards have been developed by the Climate Bond Initiative, the ICMA, the APLMA, LSTA, LMA, to provide guidance for issuers. And I think where there is more need for the regulators, and which they're working on, is, as F was saying, is to provide guidance for investors. If you look at the situation right now with the accusations of greenwashing, it's mostly directed at the labeling of investment funds, right? So what goes into a green label on investment funds, and partly that's because, in my opinion, this is only my own opinion here, because there hasn't been yet the same amount of standardization that we have seen on the issuing side. So this is a bit of the challenge that everybody's facing right now, and everybody's working on it. So we have to realize that sustainable finance, or ESG, has gone through a bubble. It's deflating somewhat with good reason. And there's a lot of sound work that is being done. And the last point I want to mention on that sound work is the emergence, the International Sustainability Standard Board, which was mentioned in one of the previous sessions. That's just released some standards, is going to be very, very important going forward.
Wow. Okay. So what I heard from ELF is about awareness, and what I heard from Professor Veronique was about standardization, or the lack of standardization. Okay, now, Dr. Agnes, please.
Thank you. Totally agree with what my fellow panelists has just been alluded to. Just let me just capture a little bit about the current state of sustainable finance in Hong Kong and perhaps in Asia, and then go to the challenges. So right now, there's been a very recent survey done by a company on 6,000 consumers around Asia Pacific, so mostly around ASEAN countries, I believe. And they found that the consumers in Thailand, like 43% of them, 43% in Vietnam, 30% Malaysia, and 27% in Singapore are big adopters of sustainable finance. And very many of these consumers are saying that, and it's been evolving. So now they are saying that in order for banks to entice them to do banking, they better offer some sort of sustainable financial products. So I think this is a great encouragement that at this stage that we're seeing this sort of responses from consumers. But going back to what what Alf and Professor Veronique were talking about, the taxonomies for investors and regulators playing a great part. We know that sustainable bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, notes, loans, all these are for corporates, right, and for investors. But for consumers as well, we are beginning to see banks offering green mortgages, even in Hong Kong, green mortgages. Green certificate of deposits are beginning to be offered, and sustainable credit cards, debit cards. Now that's amazing to me. And in Hong Kong, I just wanted to say 2 or 3 examples of innovations that are already done. As I was learning from Professor Veronique, that with sustainability-linked loans, there is step up, there is step down, bonds as well, step up, step down in terms of changing of the coupon spread, right? So one of our companies in Hong Kong called Hysan Development, back in 2019, they already have decided, they agreed that any step up, i.e. penalty, that they cannot achieve KPIs, they would go to charities. And this year, New World Development has a bond where any penalty will go to the purchase of carbon credits. And they even have issued in June a perpetual green bond. Now imagine that perpetual green bond, US dollars 500 million, being taken up by investors really fast. So is it because investors now have a great appetite for it, and what are the challenges? I see that, of course, there are many investors, especially now ultra high net worth individuals as well, and sovereign wealth funds. When they call for requests for proposals to asset managers, they say that you have to have a component in ESG or climate oriented sort of themed investments. So because of that sort of allocation, that is channeling capital to really help the corporates to decarbonize. However, on the corporate side, the challenges first up, I say, will be mindset, especially in Asia, because we're still very compliance oriented. We're still checking the boxes. I just had a very quick check on Bloomberg of how many listed companies in Hong Kong do report scope 3 emissions. Now, okay, if companies report that voluntarily, that means they really do have climate in their mindset. And I found less than 50. Ooh. All right, so less than 50 Hong Kong companies signed up for science-based targets. Now, I'm not demeaning our listed companies in Hong Kong. We have nearly 2,000, roughly 2,600. But I'm saying that the mindset has not immediately shifted to adopting and embracing climate and ESG as an integral part of doing business. So one of our speakers in the last panel, CLP, they are the trailblazers. They started in 2007, the climate action, but in Hong Kong, most of the corporates still have to slowly get that into the mindset in the boards, in the board level. Then is the competency level. So that's why climate governance initiatives, curriculum and training and world-class research is going to help the boards understand how to incorporate and how to do strategy and policy and how to deliver. So the third thing is really capacity and capability. That's a great barrier for us because we don't have enough. ISSB, as Professor Veronique was alluding to, is going to be requiring assurance. Now, from limited assurance going to full-blown assurance requires a lot of capacity in the auditor's firm and a lot of internal controls and data collection inside the corporates. So this, we haven't seen this, it's slowly developing. I'll talk about bigger stick and sweeter carrot later on. So okay. I'll stop here.
Hold on. Wow, your information is so essential. You mentioned 3 challenges, and I could only catch 2, which is mindset, especially of the Asian business, and this and capacity. What did I miss?
Board competency. That's why climate governance initiatives curriculum is going to be really helpful. So yep. I encourage every director to join as a member and take the courses.
Yeah, and maybe climate literacy is not enough. We need climate leadership, because literacy, it might just stop at compliance, but we need leadership to push forward. And when we mention the word forward, let's talk about future, right? And we can maybe link to the future by, if I were a small business in Asia, or say Thailand, exporting some automotive part to Europe, and I'm still struggling because, after COVID, I still have to survive. What are we talking about here? All this green bond, all this. So how do we kind of get those business to aware that why you're struggling to survive? This is about surviving too.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about a small business or SMEs, it's a very different problem than a large publicly listed big corporation, okay? Mm-hmm. First of all, an SME has very scant access to capital markets, none, basically. So how do they fund themselves? Well, typically, if they're big enough, they can get loans from the bank. And if they are exporters, then you can look at supply chain finance. So we had an earlier discussion about supply chain finance. And and the exporter also has to meet the requirements from their buyers. So the buyers, if they are large companies, will be looking at sustainability targets along their supply chain. Now, Agnes mentioned scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions is extremely difficult to compile. Most large corporations do not know their supply chain levels beyond 2 at most.
Mm-hmm.
So actually tallying up scope 3 emissions is extremely complicated. And it's beginning to happen, but I'm not surprised to see that very few actually report them. And what they report, how reliable is that? It's really complicated. So coming back to your SME challenge, more and more banks are, because a lot of financial institutions have their own sustainability targets, more and more banks are offering sustainable finance products. Agnes mentioned sustainable deposits and all kinds of other products. I mean, at the heart of it is not really that complicated to transform a traditional financial instrument into a sustainable financial instrument. And in supply chain, you can do that too. So one of the things you do is basically decide that you will only provide supply chain financing if the clients can demonstrate that they meet certain KPI. Or you can decide that the money will only be used, that this use of proceed will only be used to finance projects that fall under the sustainability scope, so environment, social governance. So you can do that. And in fact, if I look at Singapore, I mean, a lot of you are based in Singapore, right? Banks like DBS and UOB or CBC, they all have sustainable trade finance facilities. All the large banks in the world also have that. One initiative that I want to mention in this forum is a very interesting initiative from the International Chamber of Commerce, who, as you probably know, sets standards for trade finance. And they've just launched a digitization initiative, which is spearheaded by Pamela Marr, formerly of Lianfeng, based in Singapore. And what it tries to do is to address the challenges in supply chain through digitization. So the use of technology to be able to turn this whole very ancient process, which is very heavily paper-based, into digital and use at times of blockchain, but not necessarily. And so why am I mentioning that? Because it's linked to sustainability. If you start being able to track your supply chain, then you start being able to track sustainability impacts as well. So that makes the whole process easier to adapt to sustainability goals. I think I've spoken too much.
Oh, wow. I did not know that there's this digitalization that could make all those carbon number become transparent throughout the supply chain, which means that scope 3 in future will become transparent. Wow. And if someone were to do net zero, I'm just thinking out loud about that SME, that if they don't act now and their buyer in Europe want to go to net zero, which means that they'll have to net zeroize the whole supply chain, including their suppliers in Thailand, right? So that would be the challenge, right?
It is a huge challenge, but I think technology can be deployed to solve this problem. It's going to take time because when you talk about supply chain, one of the challenges is that you have to get consensus from many players, which is why it's been really difficult to transition to blockchain-based supply chain finance, because pretty much every big player has its own platform. And but it is possible. The tools are there. So it's a matter, I would say, bouncing back on Agnes' mindset. So are you willing to work together?
Dr. Agnes, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that lead into it. I'm so glad that our friend Pamela Ma is leading this production of a tool that can help the supply chain. So every business makes profit because you have customers, right? And therefore you are the supply chain, you are the upstream. And in Europe, as of last year, they passed legislation, and also in New York State, they already passed and executing a legislation that importers now have to do supply chain ESG sustainability due diligence. Now that means if a company is supplying to Europe and to New York State, particularly in the textile and fashions business, they're particularly about that because of, you understand, you remember the Bangladesh fires and collapse of buildings in the fashion industry supply chain. So this is not in the future. This is happening already. So if a company doesn't have the data to provide to your customers, then eventually they may have give you a little bit of time to come up with the data, but eventually if you still don't have the data, you may fall out of the procurement suppliers list. And that is a major impact to your bottom line. So we have to think about climate from the double materiality point of view. So not only how climate may affect my business. So if my business has a factory that has a power room that is in the basement, but then is near to the coast, and then sea level rise is going to be flooding that, so the whole building will not have electricity to operate, that would be my physical risk. That would be how climate affects me. However, if the cotton that comes from a region that has bad human rights, poor human rights, or if they drain all the water supply just by growing cotton and not enough water for the population, for the communities, then that will lose points on their sustainability due diligence as well. So I may not be able, as a fashion products supplier, to be able to satisfy the requirements of my customers. And so this is a whole lot of linkages that is already happening. So if we don't take action now, according to Deloitte recently had a report that says if we don't take climate action, the whole world by 2070 will be suffering a cost of 168 trillion US dollars. And there might be a lot of underestimation in that. And of that 178 trillion, around 69 trillion is happening in the APAC region. So we have to really start doing something. If not perfect, we start taking climate action.
You know, Dr. Agnes, you mentioned about the force from the investors' point of view, especially outside Asia. And even in Asia, there's a lot more. And Professor Veronique, you were talking about SME and from, you know, international buyers as another force, right? So we have two forces, one from investor, one from international buyers. What about what about from regulator? What are we going to see from the regulators?
Yeah. So just also to stay on topic with respect to SME and to try to demonstrate the point of view of the regulators. Regulators, as I said a while ago, are among the stakeholders that want to accelerate the transition. But we also want a just and orderly, and in the words of colleagues from Indonesia, affordable transition.
Yes.
So part of the transition is that as much as possible, we don't want anyone in the value chain to be left behind, including the SMEs. There is some concern, and I've encountered this in other fora, that this transition thing, while very important, will damage my business. I am too small. I cannot cope with all of these complexities that all the new standards and requirements that the standard setters are issuing. are coming out. I'm a small businessman. I'm a supplier. I'm not a climate scientist. I don't know how to comply. So there is some concern, but at the same time, there are huge efforts, not only on the public sector side, but also on the private sector side to address this concern. So a just, meaning a transition that does not unduly dislocate people and SMEs, orderly, something that will not hopefully cause the least amount of disruption, and affordable transition, a transition that all countries and all sectors of society can be part of, is the objective of the regulators and of also our private sector partners. And we actually saw how that might work in the pandemic. So in the Philippine context, because of the lockdowns, I'm sure the experience throughout the region and throughout the world, SMEs were at risk. But some of our banks actually took out issued social bonds or sustainability bonds in order to have lower cost funding that they could continue to extend to SMEs to get them through the COVID period. And many of our large companies, aware that they would need the value chain after the economy restarts post-pandemic, went out of their way to continue to fund and support the SME value chain. Right. So I think we're trying to think about this holistically, and it's not just on the government side, it's also happening on the private sector side.
Sounds great. So it means, I love that word, affordable transition. And I think that makes sense, and no one must be left behind. So we talk about from the regulators' point of view and the buyers and the investor. And it sounds to me a little bit like an inconvenient truth. Let's end this session with the positive note, which is like change can make you stronger too, right? If you are the operator like a SME, if you change by, pay attention to data and make sure you comply with the future requirement of your buyers, then you just step up. But is there anything else? Because that is just from the operational point of view. Have you seen an inspiring case where, they changed their business model, they changed the energy usage, they even changed the whole supply chain in order to change the game and become stronger together? Has anyone ever seen anything like that?
I think where we might look up for that is the younger generations. So if you take a big step back, think about the companies in Asia, okay? A lot of the companies traditionally are family businesses or state-owned businesses. And what we are seeing with family businesses, and I'm lucky to have colleagues who have a Center for Family Business in Hong Kong, and what you're seeing is that the control is passing to younger generations. And this is very significant because younger generations are more attuned to the sustainability issues and the sustainability themes. And Agnes knows better than me, but family offices run by younger generations are very keen to invest in impact investing, investments with sustainability themes. So I'm banking on the new generation here to take the businesses of Asia to the new frontier of sustainability.
Wow.
Thank you, Veronique. That's absolutely true. So I alluded to a perpetual green bond issued by New World Development. So New World Development is now run by the younger generation. Vice Chair is very much on CSV, creating shared value, and they're very innovative in terms of sustainability financing. And they even are the first listed property developer in Hong Kong to offer public housing on a very innovative scheme, partnering with government bodies to offer to younger people who cannot, afford private housing in Hong Kong. So coming back to the future, in Hong Kong, at least we also at the doorstep of China, we can see that China has the 30-60 vision, right? What is 2030? Peak carbon, 2060 carbon neutrality. Because of this, China has already told all their major SOEs that they have to contribute to that, report on their progress. And also now, starting this year, the Chinese listed companies in the Asia's companies, they have to report their environmental penalties now, the administrative penalties. So it's not a slight thing that China is doing. And also that China has recruited foreign litigation lawyers to train up their prosecutors to prosecute companies if they should be violating environmental policies and rules and regulations. So that is already a very big push in China. In Hong Kong, of course, coming back to ultra high net worths, family-owned businesses, we're seeing that going towards taking up decarbonisation. However, the majority of the businesses still a little bit slow. So we need incentives from regulators, which I will ask Alf to perhaps expand on. But I would suggest that they need sweeter carrots. Like, for instance, if the government can give them incentive in subsidizing their green and sustainability net debt issuance cost, like a tax deduction on the interest expense, for instance, covering all of the assurance costs in the future, for instance, right? And also perhaps even if the regulators can move as far as lowering capital reserve requirement on green and sustainable loan on the books, right? So that kind of movements can only be done by regulators. So we only hope that the carrots will be sweeter and the stick will not be heavier.
Please, the carrots is on you.
Yeah, thank you very much for putting me on the spot, Dr. Agnes. I'm very glad that I'm a former regulator and I'm no longer directly related to regulation. To your point, there are actually multiple ASEAN regulators that are looking at a range of targeted incentives. So in places like Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, there are potential subsidies that could be given for those issuing green social sustainability bonds to help cover the cost of the verification, help cover the cost of developing the internal green or sustainable selection frameworks. And some other countries are also looking at tax incentives. Vietnam, for example, are looking to provide fiscal incentives for those companies that issue in accordance with the National Green Taxonomy or Sustainable Finance Taxonomy of Vietnam, which is currently under development. So we have multiple attempts to provide the incentives, and I have heard at various fora the very clear voice of the private sector that if we want to move faster, incentives should be considered by government. I just have to say that my own jurisdiction, the Philippines, we are very hardcore in the sense that there are no incentives, no fiscal incentives. Okay. What we are looking at are regulatory incentives, not necessarily reduction in capital weight requirements, but viewing green, social, or sustainable use of proceeds as alternative compliance to our various mandated lending requirements, social lending requirements in the Philippines. So there is an attempt to look at some kind of regulatory incentive, but generally the Philippines takes a very hardcore stance in that sustainability is essentially good for the company. Therefore, the company should pursue it for its own sake and not necessarily for incentives. I'm sure that's not very popular in my own private sector.
Okay.
But currently, that's the view the regulators take in my home country.
Thank you very much. We have 5 more minutes and we have one question. So this one question, can someone answer briefly, and then we'll ask each of you to kind of leave the last line for the audience. Which countries are noted as lagging behind? As is there any move to aid the more vulnerable country who do not have the funds or infrastructure to make this change? Anyone?
That's a very complicated question, and also it depends on what is your we're in Asia, so what do we define as Asia? And there's a wide variety of countries with different stages of development. And this is not a new issue. It's been brought up in various intergovernmental groups at COP20 and so on. And there's been a pledge from governments, so I would say developed countries, to support the transition for vulnerable countries. Sadly, it doesn't seem to have been really followed with any sort of action. Now, one of the interesting things that I've seen in financial engineering is techniques like debt for nature swaps. So if you look at a couple of recent examples in Belize and the Seychelles, where with the help from supranational organization like the Inter-American Development Bank and NGO like the Nature Conservancy, with working with financial institutions, it helped to reduce the debt burden of those countries and invest in nature conservation. So in the case of Belize and the Seychelles, it's marine conservation. So that's one possibility, but to be honest, this is quite complex, and the scale of these transactions is not huge. But yet you can still look at creativity and financial engineering to complement the more government-driven efforts that hopefully will materialize.
Thank you very much, Professor Veronique. With that,
if I may add to that, the World Bank has already started collaborating with some European asset managers, where if they finance carbon transition, climate transition, then the World Bank takes the first loss. And so with them taking the first loss, then the investors and the fund managers will be more willing to channel capital to transitioning the economy.
Thank you very much. Kun Elf, is there anything you want to add before we end?
Well, just to add to what Dr. Agnes and Professor Veronique pointed out, it could be argued that the ones that lagging behind are the developed world, because they're the ones that contributed the most to climate change over time. I mean, this is something that's discussed at all the COPs, essentially. But when speaking about East Asia or Southeast Asia, there are, as Dr. Agnes has pointed out, there are a whole range of multilateral and bilateral agencies: the World Bank, the ADB, the International Finance Corporation, entities like GIZ, the UK-based. There are so many that are supporting this just and orderly and affordable transition in Southeast Asia. So again, my parting message to the viewers would be, please consider tapping into green finance. Funding is available, assistance is available. Please consider it because it could be a boost to your bottom line, triple bottom line as a company.
And this will bring us to the end. We have the concern that the time will be too short, and we will write at that. I would like to thank all of you, and we learned a lot. And what we learned is, maybe this session is not about green financing only, but it's about green and inclusive financing, because no one must be left behind. We are as strong as the weakest link in our value chain, whatever it is. It takes more than financial solution to solve this. Like Dr. Veronique said, it's too complicated to be solved by one single thing. So we have to look at like the whole environment. Many thanks to all of you, to Climate Governance Network Malaysia, to Dr. Veronique, to Professor Veronique, to Dr. Agnes, and to Kun Elf. Thank you very much indeed. Sawasdee krap.